Imagine living in the 1600s in the mountains of Kurdistan at a time when almost no women could dream of becoming rabbis or even publicly teaching Torah. And yet, one woman not only taught Torah, she led a yeshiva. Let me tell you about one of the most remarkable Jewish women you've probably never heard of, Azenath Barzani. Her story defies centuries of norms and reminds us that Torah leadership isn't confined by gender. Azenath Barzani was a Kurdish Jewish scholar in the 17th century who became the first known woman to head a yeshiva, a house of study. Born in Mosul in 1590 in what is now Iraq, she was the daughter of Rabbi Samuel Barzani, a renowned Torah scholar and mystic. Having no sons, he poured his entire Torah learning into his daughter, training her in Torah, Talmud, and Kabbalah. In a world where women's learning was limited, her father's insistence on teaching her Kabbalah, Torah, Talmud, and so much more set Azenath on a path no one else had walked. Azenath asserted that, "I never left the entrance to my house. I was like a princess of Israel. I grew up on the laps of scholars, anchored to my father of blessed memory. I was never taught any work but sacred study, to uphold, as it is said in Joshua 1:8, and you shall recite it day and night." By the time she was a young woman, Azenath was fluent in Hebrew, well-versed in Tanakh, Midrash, Halakha, and Kabbalah, and competent in Talmud and Jewish law, an extraordinary accomplishment for anyone, let alone a woman in the 17th century. Her marriage to Rabbi Jacob Mizrahi, head of the yeshiva in Ahmadiyya, came with an unusual condition for a marriage contract. He promised that she would never be burdened by domestic chores so she could devote herself entirely to Torah. When her husband died young, Azenath stepped into his role for decades, not just as the head of the yeshiva, but also as the community's spiritual leader. She was a woman leading a male institution in the 17th century Middle East, and they respected her deeply. One of her students even described her as the crown of Torah and glory of women because of her wisdom and her piety. Azenath taught Talmud, ruled on Halakha, and corresponded with rabbis across the Middle East. People from all over Kurdistan came to learn from her. Her letters reveal a leader deeply devoted to Jewish continuity. She described her mission as keeping the lamp of learning burning in a time when Jewish communities were struggling. In one of her surviving letters, she described herself as a woman whose strength is the Torah. She explained, "The Torah was my only dowry and my lifelong companion." She would later write, "I'm a woman, and I'm not learned in worldly matters. I've not taught or learned with women, only with men." Her entire education was in the Beit Midrash, the study hall, which is where she mastered these sacred texts. She led with a mix of authority and humility, saying, "I've been like a father to the yeshiva, teaching Torah to the students and guiding them just as my father did before me." Even amid financial hardship, she persisted in her mission to keep learning and teaching alive. However, Azenath wasn't just a teacher. She was a spiritual leader for the entire Kurdish Jewish community. People came to her for blessings, legal rulings, and religious guidance. She wrote poetry and piyutim in Hebrew and Aramaic, weaving in biblical imagery and personal devotion. In one surviving poem, she thanked God for granting her wisdom beyond her years, and she asked for strength to keep leading the yeshiva despite poverty and other challenges. Azenath Barzani was a bridge between tradition and possibility, proof that deep Jewish learning wasn't confined to men, and breaking gender barriers in Torah leadership centuries before the modern era. She remained deeply rooted in Jewish law and mysticism, had her teachings spread internationally, and even connected worlds. One miraculous legend about Azenath recounts how she whispered a powerful name during a Rosh Chodesh celebration when a synagogue caught fire. Angels descended to extinguish the flames, and the community, spared, actually renamed the synagogue in her honor. For Reform Jews who affirm gender equality in religious leadership, Azenath Barzani's life feels both revolutionary and familiar. She lived long before women could become rabbis in the modern sense, but she modeled what full inclusion could look like, finding the balance between tradition and transformation, and proving that spiritual authority is earned through learning, not limited by gender. She didn't demand change through protest, she embodied change through her scholarship, her compassion, and presence at the center of Jewish communal life. Today, Aznath's story inspires us to really redefine what Jewish leadership can look like, and that sometimes the best way to challenge a barrier is to simply walk right through it, Torah scroll in hand. In an age when women's voices were often silenced, Azenath Barzani's voice still echoes through history, a reminder that Jewish scholarship belongs to all who are called to it, and that Torah belongs to every person who seeks it. Her life reminds us that leadership in Jewish history hasn't always looked like we expect, and that sometimes the boldest act of all is simply stepping into the role that you know you were meant to fill.